Boom, live on Facebook. How cool.
Here we go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day and long day today as we begin to wind down and joining us here at Alternatives in our homes as we work remotely like many of you. And we are going to be talking tonight about youth mental health. And so welcome. Before we start diving into questions, I'd like to introduce everyone to our speaker tonight, Teka Johnson. And Teka is on a mission to help people access their inner greatness so that they can have fulfilling lives. For more than 12 years, Teka has passionately worked to empower young people and women through personal and professional development, education, advocacy, and counseling. Teka is a champion for change and strengthening resiliency in young people. She served with Start Something, 21st Century, and also is a longtime member of Alternatives here. And Teka earned her bachelor's in social work in 2012 from Christopher Newport University, and then attended Howard University, where she earned her master's in social work as an advanced standing scholar. And during graduate school, Teka's affinity for working with young men was cultivated as she liaisoned resources, provided individual and group counseling sessions, and facilitated positive goal setting for pregnant women and parenting teens in Prince George County, Maryland. And now as a licensed clinical social worker, Teka serves as a supervisor for a community-based mental health agency, and also recently, I think Teka became an independent therapist with her own practice. Yay.
Yeah, I did.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, Teka. Again, before we dive in, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A or the chat. And Teka and I will monitor those and answer your questions as best as we can. So we have, let's see here, if you could put in the chat for us, what is your connection to youth mental health? Just so we can get a sense of everyone who is with us. What is your experience or connection, I should say, sorry, connection to youth mental health? And put that in our chat.
Yeah. Who's in the room? Like, are you a parent? Are you a teacher? Are you an aunt, an uncle, a mentor?
Right.
What connects you to youth mental health?
Yeah. Malcolm works with youth in a high school for a nonprofit. High school youth, great. Wonderful, Malcolm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to put in? Parent, thank you, Carrie. Nikki, substance abuse prevention, wellness promotion. Camp counselor, aunt, co-parent, yes, children of international military officers. Wonderful. Thank you. I love having such a variety. MSW intern, love it. Parent, SPED assistant. Thank you all. A wonderful, I think, variety, Teka, of folks joining us tonight.
That's awesome.
So, yes. So, Teka, I want to start off. How would you, in your explanation to us, how would you define youth mental health?
So youth mental health, or like mental wellness for youth, would encompass like our kiddos, our children from 5 and up. So let's say like 5 to 18. And their mental wellness includes them reaching developmental milestones, so emotional milestones, but also learning healthy skills, healthy social skills, learning healthy coping skills, and then also problem-solving skills. All of that is encompassed into their mental wellness. Also mentally healthy children, you know, if we're looking for like the kind of picture of that, they have a positive quality of life. They function well. And as an assessor, we look at 3 different areas. So we look at school, we look at home, and we look at the community. So how is their functioning? Of course, this can be impacted by different experiences, but to kind of encompass it, we look at the psychosocial, or like the emotional, mental, but also social wellness of a child in those 3 areas.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to our Facebook Live, folks. We have youth coordinators at libraries, parent of 3, 1 in middle school, 2 toddlers, homeschooler, former teacher. So thank you all. Please, if you're on Facebook Live with us, please feel free to type in questions there, and I'll be trying to monitor those.
I know, right? Keep that up.
Teka, a lot of times people think about mental health or young people with mental health issues, and they make a connection to bullying. But you and I know that youth mental health is not just about being a child bully, a child who's being bullied. What are common mental health issues, though, that come up for young people?
So I want to kind of preface it by saying that mental health disorders or mental illnesses or even issues that can come up are defined as those serious changes that you notice in a way that a child learns, in a way that they behave, or a way that they handle their emotions. And this causes what we call distress or discomfort in their day-to-day functioning. And it can be caused by a lot of different things. Mental issues or mental illnesses don't happen in a vacuum, meaning they don't happen just because of one incident, but it kind of almost develops over time or is impacted by a lot of different factors. So that could include physical or emotional changes, even social changes. Like even right now, the state of our country is a social change that can impact mental issues. It could be exposure to poverty. It could be violence. And then of course we know puberty. So a lot of youth are going through a lot of physical and developmental changes that can impact their mental health.
Right.
So there are a lot of, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a lot of things then going on for our young people.
Yes, definitely. And it all impacts and can contribute to their vulnerability to a mental issue or a mental health disorder. Some of the common mental health disorders that kids can experience are the ones that we hear about in schools a lot. So attention deficit disorder, ADHD, depression, anxiety, or those behavioral disorders like conduct disorder. Those are the common ones that we'll see in children. Or even the other ones that you see, like intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities, autism. But then there are other things like substance abuse, things that maybe adolescents or even children younger and younger are exposed to, like substance abuse disorders are also things that we see that come up.
I appreciate you mentioning too, Teka, conduct disorders, because I think sometimes in the classroom, that shows up. And if we don't have resources, and we're going to talk about that later during our time together, I know that may be challenging for some adults, or they may label children as, where they're just being defiant, they just won't listen, but there may be more, things that are going on as well. So for our attendees, if you could chat for us for a minute, the question we have for you is, what are some of the stigmas around youth mental health? Ones that you may have heard of or experienced. What are some of the stigmas around youth mental health? For our Facebook folks, if you want to put those in, I'll answer, but everyone else, if you can put them in the chat. Because I think it's important to address stigmas when we talk about mental health in general. I think has a lot of stigmas, but if we're talking about young people, it's wow, what are some of those stigmas? Anybody has any?
And I'm checking the Facebook for us too.
Thanks, Teka.
You're welcome.
Well, Teka, what are some of the stigmas around youth mental health that you have heard or seen or know that we experience? And then the second part of my question would be, then what do we do to overcome those challenges?
Yeah. So if anyone doesn't know what a stigma is, I wanted to define it. A stigma is basically a disapproval or a judgment of something. Majority of the time it happens in society or in our culture. That is where the stigma originates. But for youth mental health, a lot of the stigmas originate in the way that we talk to or talk about our young people and their mental health. So for example, you may have heard, or maybe even you have said in ignorance or without knowing, a young person is kind of exhibiting these symptoms, and you say, oh, it's just puberty. Or they share with you a challenge they're having, and maybe someone may invalidate them and say, oh, you're too young to have problems. That starts to perpetuate a stigma. Or the big one I may have heard from the adults in my life growing up, oh, if you just get off that phone, you'll feel better. That is minimizing the fact that this minimizing the fact that they still have a challenge or they're experiencing something that is a problem for them. Or maybe even invalidating it and comparing it by saying, well, back in my day, or comparing them to someone else and saying, well, your friends aren't having this problem, or how come you're the only one in your class? That perpetuates stigma because it minimizes, it invalidates, and it almost compares the experience of one kid to another, which causes them to kind of almost shut down. That's what stigma does. It prevents people from seeking help because they feel like it invalidates and it makes their problems really small to the point where they feel like it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And
I see, Tika, some of our folks in the chat are putting, many kids are told they're being dramatic, you're weird, you're exaggerating, you're too young, or you'll grow out of it. Yeah.
A lot of, you do see that they call them weird, or they may say, oh, well, that kid, you know, they're a problem child, right? That is just nothing but perpetuating that stigma when you put a label on it. So stigmas also are kind of like the cousins to stereotypes, and that's where those labels come from.
Yeah.
So about 45%, which is a huge and significant number, about 45% of American youth would rather go to the internet and social media to seek help for mental illness or challenges they're experiencing than their family and friends. So instead of going to someone who may be in the same home as them, in the same school as them, in the same community as them, they would much rather seek assistance on the internet and social media. And the problem with that is that there's no filter for the internet and social media. So who knows what they're exposing themselves to, who knows what kind of information they're getting. And so we want to be able to almost put up some sort of protective factor for that to overcome this stigma so that they feel more welcome to come to their support system for help. So how do we overcome stigmas?
Right.
One of the things I definitely think is important is to provide a safe and empathetic space. And empathetic spaces basically mean that you're open to putting yourself in that kid's shoes. You're open to say, you know, me too, or I may not have the same experience, but I want to understand yours. That is what kind of builds empathy and helps them feel safe to be their authentic self so that they can share their challenges and experiences.
Yeah.
Kids also have opinions, they have thoughts, they have personalities, and so they do deserve respect. They deserve respect and they deserve validation. And that's a way to overcome stigma as well, to let them know that what you say, what you think, what you experience matters. That is another way to overcome stigma. Feedback.
I see on Facebook Live, Tika, some of our folks are putting stigmas can come from their parents saying, I know he has it because I had it, or I know he doesn't have it because I didn't. V on Facebook Live is saying children don't speak about mental health due to fear.
Yep, there's a fear because you never know where that stigma could originate. And so whether it's in a family environment, whether it's a community, whether it's in a spiritual environment, whether it's in a school environment, that can instill either hope or that can instill fear. And we have to be careful with the way that we're talking to and about our youth. I think feedback, by providing hope, by providing help, that can also help us overcome stigmas. I think when kids come to us with their challenges, or when youth share their experiences with us, it could be for a multitude of reasons, but sometimes if they're willing to accept feedback, and that means that they're willing to accept help.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, I think that's so true, Tika. I mean, all of the examples that you have given, I think just continue to cultivate young people and children not feeling like it is safe to talk about. And adults not always taking it seriously because of those things.
Exactly. We don't want to ignore it. We don't want to ignore them. There's one thing I say when we talk about trauma is that there's no big T, little t. We're not comparing experiences. And so ignoring it or minimizing something can definitely cause someone to maybe turn away from help or turn away from support. And so being able to validate that is very helpful.
Yeah.
Offering them that support.
I think that leads into our next question. Michelle in the chat said one of the things that people say is they're just looking for attention. So my question, Tika, is what are some signs that parents and family members should be aware of, things we should be listening out for or observing?
Okay. when I was thinking about, like, when I think about signs, I always try to think about it in two spheres. So one is like, okay, what is happening in the now, but then what do we know about science? So today we're talking about youth, and youth probably encompasses the ages, as I mentioned before, of like 5 to 18. And so if you are in like the mental health profession, then you probably know about like our father of psychology, Eric Erickson, who breaks it down into like psychosocial developmental stages. So really quick, I wanted to preface this by saying that your child may be experiencing things that are appropriate for their stage of development. So for example, between like 5 or 6 and the age of 12, that's their industry versus inferiority stage, where they're trying to figure out how to navigate the world. They're learning skills. They're learning through play. They're kind of almost embarking on some big milestones about going to school. They're making mistakes. You know, they're figuring out relationships and friendships and who's my teacher versus who is my friend. And so all of that can cause different challenges. But then when you're going from like 12 to 18, that's a big deal too, because they're embarking on middle and high school. They're in the stage of development where they're trying to figure out their identity and their sense of self. So they're going to be doing a lot of exploring in different areas of their life, whether it be socially, whether it be sexually, whether it be spiritually, whether it be career-wise, academically. They're just doing a lot of exploring. And so parents may say, oh my goodness, why is my kid acting like this or saying this or, you know, reading this or looking at this? Sometimes it's appropriate for their stage of development. So I kind of wanted to preface it by saying that, because I didn't want it to minimize the fact that some things are appropriate for their age. Now, where it turns into a sign or a symptom of a mental health disorder that parents and family members or even just caregivers and supporters can look out for is when, and if you don't remember anything else, it's when it impairs their day-to-day functioning.
So important to remember. Keep that in
mind and say, yes, okay, what's happening is impairing their day-to-day functioning. Even if it's one thing, you can say, well, I want to talk to a medical or mental health professional. So for our young kids, like the 5 to 12 range, you're looking for frequent tantrums or really intense irritability much of the time, so more often than not. Maybe they're having like fears, like ongoing fears and worries, and they're constantly talking about it to the point where they are not able to act or do things. Maybe they're complaining of a lot of physical symptoms that have no medical origination. You know, they may not have a medical condition, but they're complaining, my stomach hurts, my head hurts. Maybe they're having a difficulty concentrating, so they're constantly in motion, can't sit still unless they're playing like a video game or watching a YouTube video. In any other area of their life, they find it hard to sit still. Another one to look out for, which this is hard to navigate because while they're going through puberty, their body is tired. But if you're noticing your kiddo is sleeping a lot or sleeping too little, that can also be a warning sign. So staying up at late hours, you know, only sleeping for 2 to 3 hours and then just getting up and doing it again, going right back to their activities or school. Or the opposite of that, they're not interested in doing any activities or going to school. So the young ones may not want to play with their friends anymore, or they have a really hard time, you know, initiating friendships. Another telltale sign is academically struggling. So what are their grades looking at? Like, are they declining? Are they having difficulty with their assignments? That could be another sign, especially if they go from, you know, having a good academic record to struggling, or if it's kind of their ongoing struggling and then it significantly changes. Another thing is, like I said, the worries or the fears. They may do things repetitively to check. So this is most known, I think, in society as like OCD behavior. So not to over-diagnose it, but to say like they're constantly touching things or checking for things, or even checking for you. Is mommy here? I have to put my hand on mommy. I have to put my hand on my sister to make sure she's here. If not, you know, I feel like something bad is going to happen.
Okay.
Those are warning signs for our young kids.
Great.
I think for our older ones, our teenagers, you know, they're a lot, sometimes when they're going through puberty, they're a little bit more isolated. They choose not to hang out with the family as often. But if you notice that they are having this kind of significant amount of withdrawal from their life, they don't want to hang out with their friends as they normally did, or they no longer want to engage in activities that they usually enjoyed. Maybe they have really low energy. So you're like, oh, all of a sudden, you know, like you're very tired. Like for myself, I can speak from personal experience. I remember when I was growing up, like I would come home from school and I would take a nap. That's normal. You know, school's long, it's hard, it's arduous. So I needed the nap. But if you notice that they come home from school and take a nap and then they're asleep until like midnight, that's a significant amount of time to sleep. That is where you kind of draw that line and differentiate.
Okay.
Also with teenagers, you'll notice maybe weight gain or significant weight loss. Maybe they're doing excessive exercising or dieting. Asking them questions about that. That can be a warning sign too. They have also access now to things like drugs, alcohol. Are they engaging in those behaviors or putting themselves at risk or at danger more often than not? That's also a warning sign. Or maybe they even have a high energy level. So all of a sudden they have just so much energy for all these activities, requiring much less sleep than they usually did. That can be a warning sign too. They may even say that they're having thoughts of wanting to harm themselves or someone else. That is definitely a warning sign that should not be ignored.
Right.
Let's see. What else?
You've given us a great list.
I know. I'm like, is everyone writing this down?
We'll definitely have some resources available for folks at the end. And we'll be able to email you again, you know, if you want some of those. But I appreciate you, Teka, giving us examples of things of all ages. You know, again, it's not just when we say youth, we're not just talking high school, you know, we're talking that age group you said from 5 up, of things that we should be just keeping an eye on, or things that would really, like you said, give us some red flags that we would not want to wait on to be responding to youth mental health needs. There is a question before we move on. What can parents do to identify ADD, ADHD early enough, and what can educators do? Okay.
Yes. So this often shows up the beginning signs of a difficulty either focusing on tasks for long periods of time, or difficulty with what is called maintaining attention to activities. Or they may have an elevated amount of energy to the point where it's impairing their ability to complete tasks, engage in interactions, like interpersonal interactions with friends or family. If this is something that's noticed in the school, especially, you talk to their school counselor or their school social worker, and what they can do is start a series of observations, because I think ADHD is not something we want to overdiagnose, so they need to, you know, do a kind of a lengthy kind of amount of observations, testing. They'll talk to the teachers, they'll get history of their medical health, and then you would also go to a mental health professional to ask if they can also do a test or an evaluation.
Great, thank you. So Teka, we've talked about how we define it. We talked about some common mental health issues that we should be looking at that are for young people, along with stigmas and signs. And before we move into how we start to help young people that are struggling, I'd like to ask the group, I'm going to see if I can launch this poll here. Here we go. What is your comfort level in talking with a young person about their mental health? And it's anonymous, so our attendees, if you can just put in, and our Facebook Live folks, if you would like to, if you feel comfortable and you want to answer that question about what is your comfort level in talking with young people or children about their mental health. And we'll give it a few minutes, a few more seconds, I should say, for everyone to be able to put in their response.
Okay.
Very comfortable, comfortable, uncomfortable, yeah. Okay. So here we go. Can you see our results?
Okay. So we have about 55% in the Zoom. I'm not sure what the Facebook is sharing, but in the Zoom, about 55% are comfortable, very comfortable. 27% are comfortable and 18 are uncomfortable. 18%, excuse me. Okay. So let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it then. I'm glad we're comfortable. Again, we have a range, and it may even depend on the relationship we have with that young person. It could be our role in their life, you know, their age, what we know about them or their family. So yes, Tika, how do we support young people who may be struggling? That's one part of our question. And then how do you suggest we start a conversation?
Sure. So another takeaway. So the first one was, what are the warning signs? And then that's just if it's significantly impairing their functioning from day to day. But if you remember this too, notice, talk, and then act. So that is how you can support. So notice means just paying attention to the signs. So the warning signs we just talked about, changes in their behavior, changes in their grades, changes in their habits, keeping in mind that, you know, puberty and developmental changes are happening, but the ones that significantly impact them. Noticing those are what you can do first. The second thing you can do is have a conversation, which I'm going to give us some pointers on how to start that. But having a conversation, talking with that young person about your concerns, asking questions. A lot of times I tell adults in a young person's life to not assign your young person an emotion. Instead, ask them to reveal it to you. So an example of that would be, you know, don't walk up and say, oh, you look mad today, what happened? That's assigning an emotion to someone. Instead, asking, hey, I noticed a change in your mood. Can you tell me how your day has been? Or just saying, hey, you want to talk to me about your experience today, or how's school going? How are your friendships going? Asking open-ended questions. That is a good way to start that conversation. If you notice a significant amount of like sadness or depression, definitely asking also about thoughts if they want to harm themselves. It's something that I think a lot of people are scared of, but I do want to encourage everyone that talking about suicidal thoughts does not cause suicidal thoughts. Instead, what it does is it puts you in a position of support and actually a protective factor, because now that young person knows that you care about how they feel. Okay. And then the last one would be to act. So you notice, you talk, and then you act. And that action step is one step. You seek professional help, whether it be from a medical professional like your primary care provider, your pediatrician, or it could be from a mental health professional like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a social worker. But you notice, you talk, and you act. That's
Thank you. These are some really concrete things, Tika. I appreciate that. I think that's a good way for us to remember you know, how we can help our young people. And I appreciate you too saying, you know, it's about even what I have, you know, here at Alternatives, what we always say, it's not just about having a physically safe space, it's about having an emotionally safe space. And how we create that in the environments that we are in with our children and young people. Because obviously physical safety is important, but there's the whole other piece that sometimes I don't always know how well we pay attention to as much as we could, about having an emotionally safe place and being able to ask, how are you doing today? You know, like you said, how are you feeling? Or if we saw an interaction between two young people that wasn't necessarily positive, you know, circling back, not just ignoring it. Or, you know, saying, oh, I'm not going to get involved in that, or turn my head to it, or they'll figure it out. But really what I hear you say is that idea of that relationship piece with young people.
Definitely.
Thank you. Perfect.
And that's that piece about, if you wanted to go into answering how to start that conversation, I think what you said is important, is that a relationship is important. That's a starting piece, is to have a relationship with that young person. And relationship does not have to be measured by time, but it can also be measured by empathy. It could be measured by willingness. It could be measured by providing a safe space. So starting it, if you ever are wondering how to start that, I think it's important that the environment, the mood, the atmosphere is calm. And in a space where there's no pressure, you know, teenagers, young people, pressure kind of makes them clam up. You know, they'll be silent, they'll withdraw, they'll say, oh, why do you want to talk to me? So don't come up to them and say, I need to see you in 30 minutes so we can have important conversation. That is going to make them immediately shut down. Thoughts will swirl through their mind of, oh my gosh, what do they want to talk about?
We don't even like that as adults. right?
Yes.
As adults, we don't like that. When your boss says, I need to talk to you, or you get a text from a friend that maybe things aren't going well, and you're like, can I talk to you later? I mean, so why would we think kids would be, if we don't like it, young people aren't going to like it either.
No. They will not, they may not like that. So do it when it would naturally occur. You're in the car, you're driving to the grocery store. Maybe you are washing dishes or cooking together. You're playing a game together. Maybe you're, watching a video. Something where it would naturally occur is helpful because it keeps them calm. But it also kind of puts them in a space of, I have something else to focus on. And so the conversation kind of happens in a not mindless way, but in a way that has less pressure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then just start by kind of stating your observations. It could be like, hey, I noticed you haven't been hanging out with your best friend as often.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there? Or I noticed your grades have been suffering a little bit.
Right.
Are you having difficulties, or do you want to tell me about that? Or if they're more sleepy or irritable, or maybe a little bit more isolated, just kind of asking them questions. Again, making sure they're open-ended so that they can share their experience. And as they share that, validating it by saying, oh, I hear what you're saying. That must be hard. I can't imagine how difficult that may be. Those statements, although they may seem small, make a huge impact. Because again, you want your young person to know you care. That gives them a safe space when they know that the person they're talking to cares.
Yeah, that is so true, Teka. That idea of validation, I think sometimes we miss that step, not intentionally, but it's so important that we validate. We like it, again, as adults, we like it when our feelings are validated. And it's just a simple thing. I always tell people, even with young children, to be able to say, you know what, that would make me really sad too. Exactly. I get frustrated too as a grown-up, with young children. I mean, I don't use different language, obviously, with older kids, but just that idea of that having our feelings validated, I think is so important. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Of course. Yeah. Yes. I think it's another point I wanted to say, like you said, on that validation piece, is that making sure that you make it relatable and you validate, even if you don't have a personal experience to them, is sharing that maybe I know someone, or I've heard of that before, or even just the information that they're sharing is valid, and you're not minimizing their feelings or saying, oh, that's not true. You shouldn't feel that way, or there's no way you can feel that or experience that. Is important.
Right. Or stop exaggerating. It's not that bad.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So Teka, as we're having these conversations with young people, one of the questions that I know I've been asked is, what are the boundaries in talking with young people around their mental health if you're not a trained professional?
Good question. So one thing I want to say is that you don't have to be a trained professional to have empathy.
That's right.
You really don't. Talking to a young person can be so helpful. But I would encourage you also, don't hop straight into saying, oh, you have depression. Oh, that's anxiety. Like, don't hop right into comparing or diagnosing or even blaming. I think an important thing to do is to, again, state what you're observing. You don't have to be a trained professional to notice things. If you are concerned or you feel like they are exhibiting signs that they're at risk of harming themselves or anyone else, there is something called mental health first aid, where you can assess for that risk. You can ask them certain questions. And there's a website, I think it's called mentalhealthfirstaid.org, I want to say, where they have courses that you can take to become a mental health first aid trained professional or trained person. We're trying to get it to be as common as CPR.
Nice. I love that.
Yes, I think mental health first aid should be as common as CPR, because what it does is it teaches us how to identify warning signs, how to understand them, and then how to respond to anyone who's exhibiting signs of a mental illness or even just some concerns. And it just reduces that risk. So you don't have to be trained to have empathy, but you can open yourself up to maybe courses or to be trained to have mental health first aid.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, we'll be sharing some more of those resources. We have some resources for folks at the end. We'll make sure we post them on our Facebook page, and also you can reach out to us. But we want to make sure, just to let everyone know, we'll have some resources for you as well to follow up with. Perfect. Teka, another question that we have been asked is, what should I look for in services, or what questions should I ask if I believe that my child could benefit from mental health counseling? We talked about stigmas, and I know even someone earlier in the chat also posted that it's, I think one of our attendees said it's not talked about in the Black community, especially in children, and they're in other communities, and then the stigmas we have. But what are some things, if we think our child or young person in our life could really benefit from mental health counseling, what should we be looking for? What questions should we be asking?
Of course, yeah. So the first thing I would say is to start by talking to your child's pediatrician. Sometimes most of the time, they should have some, whether it be assessments or measurement tools to give you a starting point to say, here's what signs or symptoms they're presenting, here's a direction that you could go, and they'll point you in the right direction of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And when you're searching for a therapist or a mental health professional for your child, it's kind of like finding a good pair of shoes, let's say that. So I would encourage you to meet with multiple therapists. Even me as a therapist, I ask when I'm doing a consultation, are you searching and looking at other therapists? Have you started to ask questions with other therapists? Because sometimes you want to make sure that it's a good fit. You want to make sure that they're someone who would relate to your kid. You want to make sure that their background matches what you're looking for. So, for example, if you're looking for someone who specifically works with maybe a child who's experiencing ADHD, you would ask, like, hey, what's your training or what's your background in working with kids with ADHD? You would also want to ask questions about how often they meet with parents. It's important to include the parents in the treatment, but it's also important to include what we call the comprehensive treatment team. So that includes guidance counselors, teachers, the pediatrician. You would ask kind of those questions of how often they meet with them. That way you know that it's a collaborative effort. Like the same way that these symptoms or the concerns you're having for your child didn't happen in a vacuum in one place and just by one incident, it's going to be addressed by a collaborative team and a collaborative effort.
Great.
So asking those questions are really important.
Thank you. Nikki from one of our attendees, Nikki at CSB, says that they provide youth mental health training at the Hampton Newport News Community Services Board. Yes, thank you, Nikki. That's another great resource if you're joining us locally. So thank you. And then Charles has posted it, the website also on our Facebook Live. So you can click right over to, thanks, Charles. You can click right over to that as well. So the next question we have, Teka, is there anything I can do right now to help strengthen the resiliency of young people in my life? What is something I can start with right now by doing?
I love the word, first, I love the word resiliency. And whenever I teach about resiliency, I explain it as resiliency is just the ability to bounce back. So imagine a rubber ball, and that's you. And in life, we have obstacles or we have adversity, and those are brick walls. Resiliency is you going against that wall and bouncing back. So how do we build that? So resiliency is not something that anyone is born with or not. It's something that can be strengthened and developed in all of us. And I found a really cool tool that explained it as the 7 C's. And I know that's a lot. So if you're taking notes, I'll go slow. But the first C of the 7 C's to build resiliency is confidence. So young people in general, actually. So I'll say this is general. This is for people. We need this inherent belief in ourselves, that we can succeed, that we can do what we put our mind to. Not that life will be easy, but that we have the strength to do it. The second one would be competence. So competence just means that you have a set of skills to navigate the world. So those skills could include communication skills, social skills, academic skills, the skill to advocate for yourself. That's the second C. The third one would be connection. I think that's the biggest one that's impacting us today is human connection. The lack of it, or the barriers to human connection, or the unique ways we have to connect. Like today, this webinar probably would have been a seminar if we were able to be in person with everyone, but instead we're doing it through technology. And so we're finding unique ways to connect, but human connection is one of the strongest protective factors in life. Because what it does is it puts us in community, and that's where healing takes place. So the third C is connection. The fourth C would be character. And I love it, and I think about it because that's where kids in elementary school, they have like curriculums on character, which I love.
Yes.
Because what that does is it strengthens your child's values. It strengthens your personal values and your sense of self when you start to build your character and figure out what is it that drives my decisions and my behaviors in life. Usually it's your values. And so that builds character. So that's the fourth C. The fifth one is contribution. Contribution means just kind of having a sense of meaning and purpose in life. I'm in the field I am today, social work, because I found meaning in contributing to other people's lives and helping them live their best lives. That's my contribution to the world. And kids and adults, we like to feel like we have meaning, purpose, a sense of purpose. And so contribution is the fifth C. The sixth one is coping. So coping is a healthy way of dealing with your problems, or a healthy way of dealing with your issues or obstacles that come up. I think this is something that is important for adults to model for our youth, because they watch us more than they listen to us. And so coping is something that we can show them that we do. And then the last C is control. Although we may not be in control of everything, developing a sense of responsibility is important, and knowing that your choices do matter. And so that control, that self-control, it helps to build resilience. So that's the seventh C.
I love those 7 C's. I love those.
Thank you. I can't take credit for it. I got it from parentandteen.com, one of the resources I use when I am teaching and counseling.
Wonderful. I think those are so important, but there are concrete ones. I think you said like it. Yeah, I think that's good. We'll have to make sure we post that, because I think that would be really neat. Charles is on it. He's pulling it up. He's gonna, just even having that as a visual, I know sometimes for me, I post stuff up just in front of me just to, bring myself back to it, or, kind of saying, oh, something positive or something I want to remember, grow in. So I love that. So we have another poll for our participants. And okay. How have you seen young people in your life, or how have you seen how young people in your life have been impacted by the current state of our country? Let's see if people can. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're seeing it, right? Have you seen how young people in your life have been impacted by the current state of our country? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would probably almost be unanimous that we're all seeing that. We know it's impacting us as adults. So again, it would be naive to think that our children and young people, again, not even just our teenagers, but our very young children, would be knowing what's happening too. A couple people said unsure. Yeah. So then let's see, we'll share our results. There you go.
All right.
Perfect.
So 92% said yes, and 8% said no.
Well, unsure. Perfect. Yeah. So Teka, do we want to spend a few minutes? We've got a few more minutes still for questions, and we have a few more questions. But I did think it was important for us to acknowledge that the things that are happening, that they are impacting young people. Again, like I said, it's impacting us as adults. Our young people, as you mentioned, are so connected to social media and being on their phones. And I know just my belief of even with very young children, and whether it's things to people protesting, or the idea now we're wearing masks and we can't go and see our friends or grandma, or, all of the things that are happening. So I'd like for us just to spend a little bit of time, Teka, talking about that impact, and what we may be able to do, and any suggestions you may have. And I know we have a question with that. So wherever you would like to start, or I can ask the question.
Sure. So when I think about, and I actually kind of talked about or posted about this today, but when I think about everything that's going on in the world, I immediately think about how our communities are impacted and how we need to establish a sense of community with each other. As I had mentioned before, healing takes place in community. And so that human connection is important to find. So if you have your kids who are expressing or showing signs that they're impacted by what's going on in our world, I think, of course, it's important to start by having that conversation with them about what kind of thoughts they're having, what kind of emotions they're feeling. That way they know that they have the space to discuss it. And then also finding a way to get them in community, whether it be in that home where you all are, because, social distancing. So with family, or finding like online communities, whether it be through Zoom conversations, having unique ways to make it fun. So whether it be through game nights over Zoom, but that human connection is really important. And then the biggest one that I find myself, even as a therapist, needing is self-care. And self-care is this kind of buzzword.
Yeah.
Self-care is this almost kind of like it's in trend, it's on trend, it's in fashion, whatever. But it's important. And self-care is not always what we think it is, like manicures and bubble baths. But self-care can be taking time to pour back into ourselves, whether it be through reading a book, having some quiet time, practicing saying no to some things and not overextending ourselves.
Healthy boundaries, yes.
Healthy boundaries is self-care, because as our world is going through the we're experiencing, like the pandemic of COVID, but also the pandemic of racism, we need to preserve ourselves. And that's what self-care does. It keeps us here, it keeps us strong. But then also understanding that it's okay to seek professional help. There are like I was talking to someone the other day that with everything going on, as a therapist, I understand that my role is to hold space for people to process what's happening. It's traumatic. We were not prepared for this at all. And so that unpreparedness and that emotional turmoil, that's trauma. And so being able to process that with a therapist or a mental health professional is important. So I think that that's a way that we can also help our youth do that, is by linking them to some professional help too. So community, self-care, and then connecting to professional help. I think it's important.
Thank you, Teka. I love those three. It's, like you said, so crucial with all that we have going on. And again, like you said earlier, that idea of resiliency, right? I always look at it like, just exactly like you said, that's what we say at Alternatives. It's being able to overcome, being able to bounce back, getting through a difficult life situation. And it doesn't mean, unfortunately, as much as we might like it to, that it only happens once or twice in your life.
Right.
There's, unfortunately, as you move through. So I think these are wonderful things that really keep us focused on how we use resiliency in young people, how we, in ourselves, like you said, all the ideas that you gave, and how we encourage young people to do the same. So thank you so much.
Of course.
We have another question. So it says, with the loss of academics and school access to resources and summer concerns for families, and I would probably add even fall now, as there's a lot of buzz about school. What can we do to support children's academic and emotional intelligence?
Ooh, okay, so summertime, which I miss summer break so much, but for the summertime, for those of us who are caring for young people, it's important to continue to set expectations. So I always think back to how my mom was like, summertime does not mean y'all are sitting on my couch and watching TV all day. So we're either going to read a book, go to the library, you're going to get a job, set the expectations.
Go outside.
Have a good time, but also set some structure and expectations with it. young people crave structure. As much as they resist it, they need it. They really do need it, because what that does is that helps them develop, and it gives them an anchor. So when they have expectations and they have some sort of structure, it anchors them and gives them a space of certainty. So having that is good for the summertime, but especially entering into the fall, where school may look a lot different than it did last September, giving them that anchor of certainty, that anchor of structure, help them set that expectation, maybe a daily routine that they can come back to, that, and even giving them their appropriate levels of responsibility to say, you know what, now with virtual school, you're responsible for logging into your classroom. I'll provide the computer, I'll provide the Wi-Fi, I'll provide the password, but you are responsible for logging in. Trust me, your 7-year-old can do it. They can work an iPhone or a tablet, they can log into Zoom.
Yes.
But that's important. But also, it's not all about, you know, homework in school. It's also about having fun. We learn through fun and play as well. So making it fun and interactive, you know, utilizing resources like childmind.org. They have so many parenting resources, especially during this time of COVID-19, that are free, which we all love. Free resources online. YouTube, although it's something that, you know, you probably see your kids on all day, it also has a lot of educational resources that can make summer interactive and fun, but also educational. So utilizing those as well.
I would add to teachingtolerance.org. That's another wonderful resource that Alternatives uses. And it is age appropriate when we have to have hard conversations, maybe around race and equity and discrimination. That's a wonderful resource that also gives age appropriate information. So I would add that to the list also as another one. So thank you. Teka, we are about to come to a close. Our time is moving along. I did want to give time again, though, at the end, if any of our attendees and Facebook Live participants have questions, a burning question, something that you would like to ask Teka before we start to come to a close. You know, we have covered, I think it's like you said too, Teka, this would really, if we were together, we could make it like a half day holding seminar. Put a lot of information, but it's so important. It's so important. So if you have any questions, Teka, please put them in the chat, and then I will also check on Facebook. And then we have some resources, as I mentioned, to share with you all at the end.
And you said that was teachingtolerance.org or just tolerance.org?
Teaching Tolerance.
Teachingtolerance.org.
Yeah, and you can, it's Teaching Tolerance, and the website is going to be www.tolerance.org. And Charles has posted it on our Facebook. Perfect. All right. Perfect. I'm going to share a resource here. Can you guys see it? We can also, Teka, put this on our website, email it out and link it for our attendees. We wanted to make sure that everyone has some numbers to call to keep handy. So if you'll notice at the top, there are some lines like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, Contact Crisis Text Line. So if you wanted to screenshot that or write those down while you're with us, we want to make sure that people have that information. And then also, as Teka said, there are online resources. So again, we will make sure that this page is available for you all, but we did want to make sure that if people wanted some immediate information or just to know in a crisis what to do very quickly, that we gave you some information on that.
Yes, these are for in an emergency, a crisis.
Yes, yes. Also, we want to remind you that there is a quick, short evaluation once you log off. And so please take a moment to give us some feedback about our webinar this evening, and also any additional information or topics that you would like Alternatives to cover. we would really appreciate that. We want to make sure that what we're providing to our community, of course, is in line with community needs, but also any other ways that we can support each and every one of you. As we saw earlier, we had such a wonderful variety of folks joining us. And so I appreciate all of you for taking time this evening to join Teka and I. And so if there is anything else that either Teka and our alternatives can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out and let us know. So with that, I think we have about 1 minute. I'm going to check here on Facebook just to make sure there's no other last questions. All right. So we will be putting all that on there. Well, Teka, I just want to thank you so much. You are such a wealth of knowledge. It is always wonderful to work with you. And so thank you for spending your evening some time with us and talking about such an important topic around youth mental health and what we can be doing to feel more confident if we are to hopefully have some more resources, some ideas about how we can be just even better caring adults to children. Chanel wants to know, where can we find the resource list? Chanel, you can either give me your email or we will make sure we have it posted on our Facebook page so we can get you that resource list. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Teka. Any last things you want to say before we close out?
Just thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the participants for engaging and for coming and getting some information. I think this is the start to Mental Health First Aid. You're getting some really great resources and content, and I really encourage you to continue this education. You know, don't let it stop here. Mental health and awareness is it's increasing as far as our society and culture, but I think we still have a long way to go. So your part in that is to continue that education. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for everyone who personally I know as well for supporting and for definitely coming in, supporting alternatives. And
yeah. Thank you all. Enjoy your evening, and we look forward to interacting with you again.
Bye.
Bye.